Guys, how's it going?
Good. Oh, pretty good.
This is group number 5, live, coming to you. We are talking about PTSD today, which is I think, a growing epidemic, I would say. Not necessarily ratio-wise. I think that it's always been an issue, in my opinion, but it has become more prominent and well-known over the past few years. I would say that the same percentage of people I would come home with it, from my expert's opinion as well. But it's just being recognized, and there's a lot more people seeing action in the last 10, 20 years. And so VA hospitals have been overrun with psychology issues, and they're working towards better solutions.
What does invisible illness disability mean to you? So obviously we're talking mostly about PTSD and military disabilities, but do you have any personal experience with it? I know you said in your responses on that you don't think you personally have PTSD. Are there other military disabilities that people don't really know about or discuss openly?
Well, the PTSD is the big one.
Yeah. Do you think that it's getting more prominent, or do you think it's just becoming more recognized?
Recognized.
More recognized. People are more open.
Well, let's see. As the Army's grown, there have been more deployments in the last 10, 15 years.
Sure.
So more people are going to be experiencing traumatic stress.
Do you think the percentage is the same? There's just more people because there's more deployed?
Well, because there's more deployed, there's more people.
Yeah, and I agree with your assessment. Like, the awareness of it has probably gone up tenfold since like people started to used to call it like shell shock. Now it's grown into post-traumatic stress disorder. So
there are new treatments being introduced. The marijuana industry obviously is pretty into helping solve PTSD. There are a lot of PAMs, is what the lorazepam, Ativan, stuff like that help with PTSD. And there's also a lot of psychologists, specialists that you can see that will help you determine what your triggers are, what to stay away from, and ways that you can work around your triggers. So the expert that I spoke with pretty much just came down to the fact that PTSD never goes away. It is a constant lifestyle that you have to live with. It's important to surround yourself with at least one person that will be there for you and knows you well enough to observe when you're going through an episode. But it's also important to get help and to find better ways to deal with the problems that you're dealing with, so that you aren't putting that stress on your friends and family. So it's just as much your job to get help as it is for other people to help you.
And like some of the cope mechanisms, like sometimes video games sometimes helps them to try to relieve the stress.
Right.
It's good that they have like other alternatives for it. I mean, they could do like outdoor stuff or something like that. Go out shooting.
A lot of PTSD. People that suffer from PTSD actually say that video games, World of War, or, Call of Duty, Battlefront, all those games are actually help them to cope with. Death is a very real thing, and when you deal with death on a day-to-day basis, like they do in Afghanistan and Iraq, and you're seeing it and you're hearing the guns go off, you have a reason to be triggered. But by playing the video games, it almost normalizes it. One of the reasons that parents argue against video games is exactly why people with PTSD should be playing them. It makes it so that the deaths that they've experienced aren't necessarily less real, but it's more normalized. It is more, I do this on the video game, so it's
there's like a balance.
There's a balance, so they still fully understand what they've done, what they've seen, what they've heard, but they don't have to relive it every time. It's not the only death they've seen. They've seen it. They play it on video games all the time now. So it's been helping a lot. VA hospitals have extremely expanded their psychology departments. Back in the 90s, it was so swept under the rug, not talked about, and it became an epidemic. veteran suicides was insane. It was one of the number one causes of death for veterans was suicide, because they could not deal with the impact that the wars and the seeing action had on them. And
that transition back to
reality
is just like
right,
that jarring. Like there's
it
really
is
no
shell shock in a way.
Yeah.
Coming back can be its own, and sometimes people will have trouble, not necessarily with PTSD, but when coming back, relearning how to be a civilian is.
And also to have purpose too, because they knew what their purpose was when they went overseas.
That's why a lot of people sign up for the military, is to have a purpose.
Want to defend for their country, and then they come back and it's like, what do I do now?
Right. A lot of people have argued re-entry programs. What do you guys think about re-entry programs that reteach people how to be civilians, how to deal with the things that they've seen? Do you think that's something that could be beneficial, or should it be forced upon people to go through?
Yeah, it should be up to them, just to give them a choice, and to also see whether or not they actually need that type of training or not.
A lot of veterans don't even want to admit that they have something wrong. And so, in a previous episode, we talked about SPED students and how, sometimes they have a hard time advocating for themselves. Well, sometimes veterans have a hard time advocating for themselves because they either don't want to admit that they have a problem, or they don't want to be a problem themselves. Mm-hmm. And so they don't want to worry other people. They don't want to
take resources away.
Right. So it is a growing epidemic, but it's also being further controlled by more research, more psychologists. I think it's, one of the up-and-coming research being done by psychologists, clinical psychologists, is how to deal with PTSD. Mm-hmm. And that, people that suffer from it are just that. They're people. They're humans. They have needs. And how do we deal with that? It is chronic. It is a chronic issue. Mm-hmm. Symptoms include blacking out. The expert that I spoke with has a friend that literally blacks out and he can't remember the last couple hours of his life. And it's just a trigger will happen, whether it's a fan blowing, whether it's a loud noise, and then for the next 2 hours, he is suffering, has a episode, is what he called it. He just shuts down. World. Right.
So you shared with me a personal story through Messenger. Do you mind sharing that here?
What was that one?
Yeah, he blacked out.
Oh, yeah. I have a really close buddy.
Did you meet him in the Army?
Actually, we went to college together, and then there were actually 3 of us. We all went to college together. We all ended up back in the Army together, but he saw quite a few deployments, and because of that, he's suffered some PTSD.
And he still suffers?
Yeah.
Do you think it's getting better for him, or is he just getting able to... I mean, I'm sure you still see him.
Yeah.
Probably not as much as you'd like, but do you think it's getting easier for him, or do you think that he's just learning new ways to handle it, obviously, with knowing what his triggers are and...
Well, I know that he recently got out of the Army, and he's back with family.
That's good.
So his whole environment has changed.
Okay.
In a positive manner.
Sure. Are you aware of whether he's dealing with it less now that he's with his family and stuff like that? Does he still have as many episodes? Would you say that they're episode prone, or do you think it's a constant battle?
I don't think he has the triggers nearby.
Okay. I know people talk about like ceiling fans and loud noises.
He's also getting treatment also.
Okay. Is there medication that can be handled, do you know? Or is it mostly just patient treatment with therapists and psychiatrists?
Psychiatrists.
But he continues to function, is the interesting part. And so how do you diagnose that? How do you see that? If they're not willing to come forward and discuss those things?
Yeah, it's like that saying, if you can't help yourself, then who will?
Right.
It's like, it's up to you, but it's also tough for them because,
Mm-hmm.
PTSD is pretty serious.
It's a very serious issue.
Yeah, and I guess the programs to help the veterans like come back from like war zones into civilian life, it feels like they should be like forced or like really recommended just to help. I mean, if they're going to spend those resources on that, then
Right.
the veterans don't have to feel like they're taking resources away if they're already available, ready to go.
What about like a pre-deployment like group of classes where we talk about a reentry program, which I think is a great idea. I think you have to go through clinical psychologists to make sure that you are safe to reenter into civilian life. You're not going to be harmful to yourself or others. But what about a class that preps you for what those symptoms look like, so that if you or your people in your company are suffering from those issues, that you can recognize it at least, because it's previously it's been so badly stigmatized that people don't even want to point it out. It's like pointing out somebody else's child has a mental disability. Mm-hmm. That parent is not going to want to see that. Mm-hmm. So
that would be interesting. Would it like maybe detract from like not like I won't say like their eagerness, but their willingness to like actually go and then do what they've probably gone through boot camp for, or like what? That's true. What sort of
ramifications? Yeah,
or like when does it take place? Does it take place before boot camp? Does it take place after? And then in between that time?
That's right.
Yeah,
something they'd have to go through. I mean, during boot camp would be interesting, but it might detract from the physical hardness, which is what you're going through. It's an interesting topic that needs to be further discussed, I think, and definitely not discussed enough among regular folk,
right?
Citizens and not citizens, civilians. We're all citizens.
It kind of makes sense because, as civilians, it's like if you've never gone through the military, it's like you're not going to really know what they're going through.
Right.
And so, there's a lot of opportunities to try to help the veterans that come back, but it's just a matter of time to see what will be most effective and what will not be.
So I asked my expert if we're doing enough for veterans that are coming home with PTSD. What do you guys think?
Well, it probably could be obviously stepped up. I think those programs that help them come back into civilian life would probably definitely like be able to show them that the skills that they kind of maybe learned or trained for how they can be applied to technical skills or engineering skills and stuff like that. I think I've seen that happen with like a lot of like technical schools will actually be like, you can pretty much just come in here, take a few tests, and you have your certificate, and you just go right into the workforce.
That's awesome.
So that would be a neat way to kind of, I guess, show like we appreciate your sacrifice, and here's just like work and stuff. So
what do you think?
Honestly, that'd be good.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're doing more now than we have in the past, for sure. But there's always more that we can be doing. They do make the ultimate sacrifice for us and for their family, and so we should be doing as much as possible to make sure that their transition back home is as flawless and smooth as possible. It's going to be a bumpy road regardless of what we do. This has been Group 5, coming to you today with PTSD. Our expert is John Hendricks. He's in the Army. He's been in the Army for, I'm not going to say the number out loud because I don't remember it. He is in the Army band. He plays trumpet, and that's a wrap.
Awesome, guys.
How good are you at editing?